This has been dragging on for a while, and it's really a concern because you have very few days to the August 8th general election. In studio, I have Joy Brendam Divo and Jesse Oduor. Both of them are lawyers, but then political minds as well. Thank you so much for joining me on News Center this morning.
Thanks.
So, without looking at the merits and demerits of the case that's currently going on, IEBC is on record saying they do not have enough time to look for someone else to print the ballot papers. Joy, are we pushing it too far as a country?
Whatever the Court of Appeal decides during this hearing, I do not think practically there's time for us to start the process the way it's envisaged in the procurement and public disposal of public in the Act, because the problem is the way we have set our systems. They're lengthy, they are time consuming, and with the deadline looming, so I mean, because August 8th is barely 25 days away, there's not enough time for us to go through the process and still deliver before the election is due. And what we'll end up with is a situation where the election is here and we don't have ballot papers. Ballot papers are the basic ingredient that you need when you're starting this electoral process, because that's what you mark. So if you don't have ballot papers, then the rest of the process is mad. Now, for us to get to this point, I think, say something about us as a nation, because it's a lack of trust, a lack of integrity. The IEBC also, remember, we had this argument earlier in the year when we were saying, should we remove the Isaac Hassan Commission? This is a young commission. They've come in trying to do the best they can, learning on the job. So we as Kenyans have set ourselves up, and that is why we are where we are right now. And I think I would echo the words of Abdul Badida, what he told them on Monday. It's like, look, you are the commission, you're the only ones in this country who can run this election, then go ahead and take charge and run it. So whatever the court says, I wish the IBC just go ahead, bite the bullet, do it, and then deal with the aftermath. Because if it gets to the 8th and there are no ballot papers at all, I think it will fare far worse than we have Al Ghurair ballot papers, in my opinion.
Jesse, do you think IEBC should just print? You know, we'll deal with the aftermath later.
No. The moment they go, as my learned colleague says, bite the bullet and go on with the printing, then that means you actually, that election is not even credible, because you're already violating a court order that is in place. So eventually that will be running an illegal election in itself, because you're using materials that were clearly demonstrated by the court that you shouldn't do, and you went ahead and did it. On that alone, it will nullify. There's no way you're going to.
When did the court say that those materials were incorrect?
I mean, the ballot printing for presidential elections was stopped
because of public participation, not because.
But then, Joy, how do you use the ballot papers printed by Al Ghurair that the court have?
But why would you not use? Because this process has been in court since last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
At no point.
And we have 24 days to the election.
At no point did the court say Al Ghurair is not fit to print this ballot.
No, they never said Al Ghurair is not fit.
Exactly.
The printing of presidential ballot was stopped, and that's why we're in court.
It was stopped because of public participation, which happened on Monday and Tuesday.
Come on, you can't reverse the process that public participation is not there. Now the printing is going on. Why is the public participating now?
The public participated in getting those commissioners. The public participated in getting this constitution. The public participated in entrusting these particular commissioners with the role of running this election.
Maybe the public should also participate.
The thing is this, because what is good for the goose is good for the gander. We can talk about public participation, for example, about the presidential ballot papers, and we've not talked about Kim's, the ones for the other. There's so many things that IBC has procured that the public has not participated in, and primarily because those are administrative things. So if that's what I'm saying, if it was the IEBC, I'd rather have a ballot paper than have nothing and say, you know, the court said we cannot because the public know. What do the public know about printing ballot papers? What do they know?
I want a credible, organization. I want to trust them.
That is the law. You want the public to own this process. At the end of the day, this election is not about IEBC, it's about Kenyans. And the Kenyans have to have a stake and a say in it. And then moving forward about the timelines, I think even IEBC is also shooting themselves in the foot. You're here talking about time is not there, and then instead of just doing what the High Court told you, you still go ahead to appeal this decision, which is also more time. What happens if the Court of Appeal upholds the High Court decision? We are still going to be in the same spot.
But don't you agree that clearly they don't have time?
Clearly they don't have time, and the law envisages there are two aspects, as my colleague says. The other, the longer one, and direct procurement. Why can't they just go for that? Because the IEBC is trying to be like an octopus. At the one point, they are calling these stakeholders public participation and then appealing that decision. They rather just choose a struggle and stick to it.
Jesse, it's called a multi-bet. you want to get, you're complying with the court order on one hand, but
and
on the other hand,
you don't agree with that the same court order you're appealing that decision.
But that decision needs to be appealed, not just for the sake of the IEBC, for the sake of all public institutions that go ahead with procurement procedures without public participation. Because the way the judges framed it was, you know what, yeah, we think Ekuru had a point, there was no public participation, but we won't tell you what it's supposed to look like. You go figure it out and then tell us what you think the public, where you think the public can participate.
So from where you see it, what role does public participation actually play in all this? How important is it?
This late in the day, if the judges were saying there was no public participation, they ought to, in the very least, tell us, and this public participation would have looked like 1, 2, 3. Then the IBC would know what they're supposed to do. But they told us, no, you guys go figure it out, then come back. There's no parliament to pass any new regulations. There's there's nobody to vet and look at whatever proposals the IBC would even said to come up with. If they come up with proposals, the next thing they'll know they're in court because these proposals were. It's one of those things that it was giving with one hand and taking away with the other, because you tell us one thing, but public participation is such an amorphous concept in light of procurement. We know what it looks like when we are selecting people. It's a vetting, it's send your comments. But even what happened on Monday with the presidential candidates, who are the ones who were the primary, the ones who made the presentations court, even listening to Ekuru, I don't see how he was adding value to the process, because even with direct procurement, we still have to assess capacity. Do they have the capacity? Our papers have got 7 security features. These ones are even for the MCA. Do they have the capacity to produce a paper with 7 security features? Payment facilities. You know, Arguria have been printing our ballot papers for the last, even all the by-elections for the last 4 years. We already have an account with them, so to speak. Somebody else, are they going to need money? Do we have that money? There's no parliament to pass a supplementary budget. So where are we going to get this money from? So the logistics is not as simple as walking to a shop and saying, I want a shoe size 7. It is more complex than that. And that's why I was saying, if it was the IBC, I'd rather just have something on the table. Let's go through the process. Then afterwards, we can figure it out and see, okay, was it so bad that the papers came from Dubai, or they still worked?
Is it worth the risk? Can you just, like let's say, just print and then we'll see what happens
because
later?
How do you have elections for governors, senators, for everybody else except president?
Because you know you're setting up this thing for contention. Because if something goes wrong, someone say, but we told you, and you guys went against the court orders.
The thing is this, since 2016, we've been talking about this Algurea. In the world, there are about only 7 companies that have the capacity to print the papers the way we want them. I've said here before, if we were really people who had integrity and who thought straight, this is something that should be run by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It should be something that is printed by government printer. You go in the morning, you vote. But we are so suspicious of ourselves. Exactly. Because in Britain, in France, in those democracies, it is run by government. You go to the US, the US doesn't have an IEBC. Exactly. So we as Kenyans have put ourselves where we are right now.
Jesse, is it a problem of our own creation?
Our own suspicion.
And meanwhile, maybe we can listen to what the Deputy President had to say about IEBC in a couple of minutes. Jesse?
To a large extent, it is a problem of our own creation. We have mistrust. We don't trust the institutions that we put in place to handle the work that they're mandated to do by the Constitution. And then just moving backward, Joy. Parliament hasn't been dissolved. The Constitution is very clear that the term of Parliament expires on the date of election. So if it's about passing a supplementary budget, we can still recall Parliament to do that.
From where?
So those excuses are not there. Whichever the quorum is there, so long as we have a quorum, even if it means 20 MPs or 15, let them pass that legislation.
Quorum is 50. There are 20, we are going back to court.
Let them have that. Because at the end of the day, it's about their elections. They'll have to come back.
Then the papers are being printed. Papers are in Ashida. The MPs and the governors and the senators are being printed.
No,
the ones that are not being printed are the presidential
we can't
ones only.
split the elections that now we are going these other elections and then the presidential election.
Exactly my point.
So they'll have to come back and do this because it's going to affect them at the end of the day. But then we can't assume that, okay, bite the bullet will sort out the other things. That alone itself.
It's not an assumption. That's what's going to happen.
That alone in itself is going to discredit the whole process, by the way.
No, you know I'm saying that's what's going to happen. 20 days. 20 days. It's a choice of either we have an election with fishy ballot papers or we don't have an election at all.
I like the way you say fishy ballot papers. Why will we do that? Elections with fishy ballot papers. You're just using your word.
The fishy is perception, because the courts have deliberated of this matter over and over again. There is no reason why not Al Ghurair.
Yeah.
Just because we say, no, we don't like this farm. The court says, but there's no, we don't like it. IBC says, but we've already given them 2.8. No, we don't like it. Fine, you insist all you want, but now you've got into a place where it's crunch time. This game, the show has to go on one way or another. And if we do Abdul Badida, fine, let's give some secondary school students, or we give the Laru. It will even be worse, printing them in Kenya.
But you know, we print our money in this country.
We do.
Why not election materials, you know?
Okay, let's listen into what Deputy President William Ruto had to say about this whole IEBC and Al Ghurair.
Respect their constitutional duty to hold elections on 8th of August. We will not accept the kind of games we are seeing being played by the people who are not ready for elections on the 8th of August.
Accept the kind of games by people who are not ready for the August 8th general election. Jesse, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's quite unfortunate that he looks at it from that point of view. And I want to say categorically that that was a politician speaking and not deputy president. I want to assume that you can separate the two, which sometimes is quite a theoretical thing, but not practical.
Yeah.
But then, you see, the problem is, the telltale signs were there from 2016, as my colleague says, about this printing all thing. We should have sorted this thing out, not to wait up to last minute. Of course, Kenyans are known to be last minute people. It's not about playing games and people not being ready for elections, because the date of election is actually not even cast on stone, it's cast on steel. You can't change that. So
So why is there? Why are different politicians saying that probably this is a ploy to get the election to be postponed?
You can't postpone the election. Everyone knows that.
If it's cast in stone.
In fact, you can predict the next election. So long as we have this constitution, you can predict with certainty the election dates for the next 100 years. So long as we have this country constitution, that is not going to happen. He is a politician. He has to get airtime and he has to capitalize on anything that's going. But then we also have to be reality. If somebody moves to court, it means there's a grievance. If the court have already ruled on something, you don't use that ping pong and use that as an excuse. So long as a law has been broken or somebody did not appear to lay down procedures, then you still have a right to move. You don't have a quota where you say that you've exhausted your quota when something has gone wrong, like you went to court yesterday, tomorrow you went to court, last week you went to court. So it doesn't mean that now you've gone to court so many times that when something is not right, it stops you from going to court. There is no estoppel rule as far as defending the law and the constitution is concerned.
Joy.
But you can go to court to a place where it's nuisance, because yes. Now, and let me qualify that statement.
Yeah.
We're in court today with this court of appeal. In Kisumu, there's a matter that the results must be declared in 7 hours.
also going back to court by the same thing, eh?
I think those are NASA operatives, actually, if I'm not wrong, but they're filed in the High Court in Kisumu. We had Kalonzo yesterday saying that they want to go and force the registration of the voter register online. And we have all these cases that we have been treated towards the end of the... And all along, while we were passing the election laws, while we were passing all these things, all the players were in this country. So this thing of we are last minute people as Kenyans, and so this is the excuse. I think sometimes that's why, like me as a Kenyan, as an observer, I would also surmise that people don't want, people don't want elections on the 8th. You say, why would the elections be postponed?
Why would people not want the election on 8th?
Why would they want the process to be so mad? Because, you know, every time we go to court, the IEBC takes a beating, the credibility takes a beating. Whether or not it is perception, whether or not it is accurate, it takes a beating. Now, there are people like Wanjiku who will not break it down and see that this was an unfair one, this was not. They'll be wondering, if they're going to court so many times, there must be something wrong. And what we have done now is this institution, when we sent Akina Isaac Hassan home, we thought that now we are bringing an institution that Kenyans can have some trust in. Before they've even taken their first exam, we've already failed them by how we have repeatedly been trying them. Until now, they seem to have failed. But now, come August 8th, for example, and we do not have ballot papers because some Al Ghurair, whatnot, it has gone and we have no ballot papers, then we cannot have an election. then what the law says is we must go for caretaker government. Caretaker government is a negotiated settlement. Parliament has to be involved in that process.
So that's why guys are talking about
Nusumkate, and they're saying, look, if we don't have elections, the alternative is this negotiated settlement. We are not interested in those negotiations.
Pause for a while. There are millions of Kenyans currently watching. Do you want to repeat that again? If we don't have an election on August 8th, what happens?
We have to go to a caretaker government. So for the next 60 days, we will be governed by a negotiated settlement. It will be an arrangement that Parliament has to be involved in for us to have leaders who are negotiated. Now you can imagine if we've had elections for the governors and the senators and everybody else, so you have your new MPs, then now you start negotiating how we are going to deal with the country for the next 60 days. It's not a desirable outcome. That's what I'm saying. If you weigh not having ballot papers or having ballot papers that some people do not think, I would rather we just have this election, get it over and done.
Now it makes sense why people are making a lot of noise about Nusumkate and coalition government. You're watching News Center. Thank you for staying with us. I still have, we're still going to have this conversation, a continuation of it in a few minutes. Allow me to take a break.
This is KTN News.
Kila bao, kila jaribio, kila tokeo lenye utata, kamera za zilizala viwanjani zitakuwepo.
Absolutely huge. You like it?
Tunajitahidi kukuletea habari motomoto za spoti zinapochipuka. Uwe mchezaji mashuhuri au chipukizi, zilizala viwanjani itakupa fursa ya kujulikana ndani na nje ya ukumbi. Sisi sio wanahabari pekee, bali sisi pia ni wanaspoti. Kwa hivyo ungana nami kila siku saa 11 jioni katika makala ya Zilizala Viwanjani. Ni Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa. Mimi ni Hassan Juma. Na hii ni Zilizala Viwanjani, mahali ambapo wachezaji wanapokusanyika.
It's the 6th edition of the Desert Wheel Race from the 20th to the 22nd of July 2017, this time at the Maasai Technical Training Institute in Kajiado County, organized by the Northern Nomadic Disabled Persons Organization NONDO and the County Government of Kajiado. Don't miss.
The economy is still not growing fast enough to create the jobs we need. The majority of black people are still economically disempowered. They are dissatisfied with the economic gains from liberation. The gap between the annual average household incomes of African-headed households and their white counterparts remains shockingly huge.
This is KTN News.
Belongs to Baba.
Yung mdada. Good morning. Thank you for staying with us. Let's look at our top story this morning. Former Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission Chairman Ambassador Bethel Kiplagat is dead. He died after long illness at the Nairobi hospital where he had been credited for involvement in the Somali, Sudan and Mozambican peace process. He served as Kenya's ambassador to the United Kingdom and to France. We have several leaders sending in their condolence messages on the passing on of the ambassador. Earlier on I spoke to Professor Tom Ojenda, who worked very closely with him, saying he was very committed to the work that he was doing. That's one of the big stories that we're focusing on for you today. Also this morning, the Court of Appeal is hearing IEBC's appeal against the High Court directive that it retenders for the printing of the presidential ballots. That's currently happening right now. Could we cross over and just listen in a little bit?
That, my lord, in our humble submission, is the right position to take in connection with this matter. That to grant an order, the effect of which would be to stop the election, would harm the greater good and would harm the greater population as compared to the one applicant that appeared before the court. In each case, the court has to consider the nature and extent of the rights asserted. The timing of the application for leave to file the substantive application was therefore of great importance. It should have been filed earlier. My lord will notice that what happened in refusing leave, the right that was then being curtailed was the right to be heard, was the right for the court to hear the party, which is also a constitutional right. So in this particular case, my lord, in balancing between the right that was being asserted by the applicant and the greater right to ensure that the elections are not hindered in any way at all, the greater right, my lord, was that the printing of the ballot papers should have been allowed to proceed so that the elections are held on the date fixed by the Constitution, which is 8th of August. And so, my lord, for those reasons, we urge, my lord, to allow the appeal in view of the deleterious effect that not granting that order will have. My lord, may I just spend 2 minutes, with your permission, dealing with the question of the prejudice, if any, identified by the first respondent before the High Court. I think, my lord, it's a critical issue that I need to discuss. My lord, at page 23 of volume 1, the prejudice, my lord, that will be suffered is identified at paragraph 10. And my lord, the only prejudice that has been identified is that chief among there has always been the printing of excess ballot papers and result forms and ballot stuffing. Those are the ones that are identified would be the risk associated with the printing continuing through the second respondent. Those are what identified, because the other issues of tampering with and substitution of results have nothing to do with printing of ballot papers. So the ones that, my lords, are identified is the printing of excess ballot papers and result forms and ballot stuffing. My lords, when you look through the document I referred you to, which was the press briefing, you will notice that mitigation measures had already been put in place by IEBC to ensure that this does not happen. And as I've said, nobody has complained about the sufficiency of the mitigating factors that had been put in place by IEBC. Now, in his submissions, which is in the supplementary record, proceedings. Learned counsel for the first respondent, the applicant in that case, at page 22 of the submissions, which would be page 26 of the supplementary record, Mr. Awele is quoted as saying, this case is about impressions and perceptions. It's about a critical process and the right to self-determination. And then at the bottom, he says the printing of ballot papers has a direct correlation with ballot stuffing. So when the applicant says it is apprehensive that one of the candidates has a relationship with the printer, that concern must be taken seriously. So that the only identified prejudice or risk that was identified is ballot stuffing and printing of excess ballots. And the question then becomes, my lord, if that is the prejudice that had been identified, sufficient mitigating factors have been shown, have been put in place. But more importantly, is the order to be issued one whose effect is to stop the elections to stop the printing of ballot papers required for the elections, or is it to address the...
All right, that's what's currently happening at the Court of Appeal. We'll cross over later and just listen in as well. But away from Kenya, U.S. President Donald Trump will watch American and French soldiers march together through Paris in a celebration marking Bastille Day and 100 years